Hello and welcome to part 1 of my series on Introduction to Google Script. In this video I'm going to show you what Google Script is, how to access and edit it, and show a couple brief examples of how it can be used. So to start with, what is Google Script? Simply put, Google Script is a programming language. It is based on the JavaScript programming language. A programming language is an intermediate language format that both humans and computers can understand. While computers can only understand the zeros and ones you are so accustomed to seeing when people are talking about computer language, programming languages such as Google Script allow humans like us to write instructions for the computer that they can then understand, hence why I refer to it as being intermediate. Google Script can be accessed through any of the standard Google applications, such as Google Docs and Google Sheets. So to see Google Script in action, we're going to go to the Tools and Script Editor next to these two angle brackets. Here we see the basic code editor. We have the name of our project, couple of menus we could go through, some different options up here, our list of files, and the contents of this file, code.js, which contains some Google Script code. Now, this is not exactly what the computer is going to see when we run this, as it gets interpreted into the binary language of zeros and ones that the computer understands. But for us, we just need to see it like this. Now, Google Script, like all programming languages, is governed by several rules of syntax. Syntax are rules for how the source code is structured such that the computer can understand it. We can't just write whatever we want and expect the computer to understand it. As you can see, this is invalid syntax, so a computer won't automatically understand everything you put into it. It needs to follow the rules of syntax. Let's start with a basic function. A function is a reusable block of code that you can invoke in several different places. Some people refer to them as methods or subroutines, which I think is a particularly descriptive way of putting it. So it starts with a function keyword, which tells the interpreter that what comes next is going to be a function. We need to give it a name, which can be anything we want so long as it starts with a letter or some special symbols such as an underscore. But generally speaking, I prefer to start it with a letter just so it's easier to read. Next, we have two of these parentheses located on your 9 and 0 keys. We will see what these are used for later, but for now we're just going to leave them empty. And then you have the curly brackets, which are located next to the P key on your keyboard, and you have to hold Shift for them. These curly brackets show what is the body of the function. So whenever the interpreter is going, it sees this and says, this is a function. It is called example function. And everything between these two curly brackets is part of example function. Anything outside of them is not. Next, let's add a little bit of body to this code, because right about now it doesn't even do anything. So to start, so this is just going to be a very basic example. You don't have to understand how it works, but I'm just going to show you so you can see for yourself how this works. So I'm going to write logger.log. Notice how this pops up, how these suggestions pop up. This is very nice as it can allow you to see what it is you're looking for sometimes in this list, so you don't have to type the full thing out all the time. So I just wrote, this is what is known as the Hello World program. It is usually the first program most people make in a language, just, to see how it works. So in this case, we've written logger.log, then open parentheses, and hello world in quote marks. And I'll explain what each of these do in the future. So now, that's great and all, but what does this even do? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that it's selected example function here as the function we want to run, and then I am going to run it. It appears to have been successful, which is good. So I will go to View, Logs, and as we can see, it printed the message Hello World, which is what we wanted. Sometimes I've noticed on Firefox it does take a moment for the logs to load, so you can go to here if you want to see the output faster. Apparently it did not log here. Now let's go over what all of this means. The first part here is logger. Notice how the L is capitalized. The logger is a special thing that Google Script gives you access to. It's a special type of object that can help you with logging your output. The .log here, well, first of all, what is log? Log is a special function belonging to the logger, just like example function here is a function belonging to this script. It doesn't technically belong to anything, but in this case, log belongs to the logger, and the dot is used to signify that. So saying logger.log is the same thing as in human language we would say it as the log method belonging to logger. Here, you will notice that after log we have these open and close parentheses with the message hello world in between the parentheses. These parentheses allow us to do what is known as invoking a function. A function has two separate parts. The definition, which is this here is the definition of example function, and invocation, which is where you invoke or run the function, as here in the log call. Now, whatever is in between these two parentheses here is known as the arguments. Arguments modify how a function runs. For example, if we add another call to logger.log with different arguments, it will take a long time to load for no apparent reason. As you can see, it printed two separate messages, just because I passed different arguments each time. The quote marks around hello world and something else signify that what is between those two quote marks is a string literal. A string is the computer equivalent of a word or letter. So essentially it means this is to be interpreted literally. I don't want you to try to think of this as a function or a variable or anything like that. This is literally what it appears as. The last bit of syntax we have here is the semicolon. The semicolon denotes the end of the line. It's kind of our equivalent of a period, where you mark the end of a sentence with a period or other punctuation, except in programming you do this at the end of every statement. Notice how we don't have a semicolon at the end of this curly bracket here, because it is not the entire statement. And we don't put one at the end of the function declaration here. And that is it for this very basic introduction to Google Script. Please see my later videos as I go into more detail about a lot of these things, and some new content as well.